Perfect Turd Podcast, episode 147. Lamar, kicking off the Halloween season with Rock and Roll Frankenstein.
Boy, are we ever. Let's talk a little bit about the not the movie itself, but why we're watching it because you were contacted by the director Brian O'Hara,
I sure
correct?
was.
Yeah, and he was like, "Hey, I have this movie. You guys are into B movies. You should check this out." And then for some reason, I watched it, and then I was like, "Oh boy, Joe, you should watch this one because you had brought up we have never done a Frankenstein showdown." And I was like, well, after you see this, I don't think you're in the need of Frankenstein showdown because there are so many things in this movie that are just a full episode to discuss.
Yes. And we're going to rate it with our categories, 1 point per category for each of us. And the first category is, Lamar, what did we think of the story?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So let's explain the story because that's the craziest part probably of this whole movie. There's this greedy, music exec. One of his bands has left, and so he has his nephew. What's the term? Is he a necrophiliac?
He's a necrophiliac.
He's definitely
a scientist. But also a necrophiliac.
And so his necrophiliac nephew is working on something for his uncle of combining all of the parts from past, rock and rollers into a new person. So he just can make a new person rather than deal with like a person, an artist. So what are all the parts that are assembled to make?
We have Jimi Hendrix's hands.
Boy, oh boy, we're going to talk about that.
Keith Moon's legs. Sid Vicious's ass. Of course, Elvis's head, and they were supposed to get Jim Morrison's penis, Lamar, but unfortunately they messed that up, and they just grabbed any random penis that happened to be in a jar, and it ended up being Liberace's.
Yes, and as we know, he was he outed or did he come out himself as a gay man?
I'm not sure.
Okay, but yeah.
Which plays an integral role in the plot because the rock and roll Elvis, they want him to be a sex symbol, a rock and roller and all this. But he has urges that he's never had before to have relations with men because of Liberace's penis on him, which kind of then leads down another kind of storyline where he just starts killing people.
Well, Joe, that's how you have to have a gay penis to be gay. That's the science of it, right, Joe? That's how it works. It's simple and plain. So yeah, that leads him down to coming to grips with his sexuality in violent ways against groupies, and they have to try to hide it. And shockingly, that's what the movie is about.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say this. I like the premise of this, like taking all the rock and rollers and making them to something. I thought maybe they would get by accident like a serial killer's brain or something, and that's what would make them go crazy and start killing people.
Yeah.
Instead of the penis, making him into a self-hating.
Oh, wait a minute. We have to talk about the penis is talking to him throughout the movie.
Yes. Urging him to be with men and ultimately urging him to kill people, I guess. So I'm going to give it a half a point because on one hand, I like the premise. On the other hand, it went into a different direction and it was a little too long as well. So 1 point for me. Half point for me. Half point for me.
I agree with you. When you name a movie, Rock and Roll Frankenstein, like you said, you're probably thinking, oh well, he can't deal with being, in this, world as it is right now. He's, coping with all these different parts. I didn't think the whole Liberace's gay penis part would come into play. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but yeah, half a point for me as well. Yes.
All right. Well, the next category is the Frankenstein lore.
All there is just combining the rock stars. I feel
Yeah.
like they could have did more with that because it's almost like they could have just resurrected Elvis Presley. But okay, we Sid Vicious's posterior. What does that have to do with
I
anything?
don't really know, honestly. Like,
Keith Moon's legs.
that kind of makes sense because he's a drummer and he the kick pedal, but
But he never plays the drums in the movie.
yeah, that's part of it. And they never had the like a really great scene where he comes to life. That scene was kind of like shushed. Like they should have at least given him some bolts in his neck.
Yes.
They could have had like this scene like one, like he was a hero because he has all this talent of all the things, but then he goes berserk. Then
Yes.
you can have like the townspeople chasing him. They, like all the kind of Frankenstein lore.
Well, they had to supplement that with the undercover gay plot, Joe. So yeah,
I mean, it was kind of funny just the fact that he had black hands from Jimmy. Like there were
yeah,
some
and they
parts
used
that
the
were kind
racial slur to highlight that. That was
but I mean, other than the kind of funny ridiculousness of putting them all together, like it really has nothing to do with Frankenstein lore.
yeah. So
So I guess I'm gonna give it no points for this.
everything you just said, Joe, like it was just like they put them together and that was it. And it's like if they would have had like different things going on with him being Rock and Roll Frankenstein, that would
Yeah.
have been cool. So
Well, the next category is the rock and roll connection.
I mean, there was a connection.
There was.
Uh, like we said, Sid Vicious is I'm using all the different words for ass. Behind. Sure. Keith Moon's legs. Sure. Jimi Hendrix's hands. They made him black. I don't.
They should have had a scene where he just went crazy on guitar uncontrollably. You know what I mean?
Oh, and they have to reel him back in, like,
Yeah.
and they have to like walk him now to like how to perform and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
mean,
I think that would have been funnier, like if he had all this talent from all these different rock and rollers, but he couldn't control it.
he
Like
was
it
always
just
making songs. He was always real
yeah.
hard on his band, and he was just nuts. But I'll give him a half a point.
I agree.
Half a
Half
point.
point.
Half a
It
point.
did do it. Like he had the Elvis voice. They
Yeah.
dressed him like Elvis. So yeah, that was fun.
Yes.
The next category, Lamar, is special effects.
Well, Joe, we get back to Frankenstein's weird dilemma with him, rock and roll Frankenstein's dilemma of being gay. And there's a scene where he cuts open a woman and begins to have sex with her because of the gay penis telling him to do so. Um, that's about it. Like that's
I,
yeah. And oh well, at the end there's a very strange penis scene as well.
there's multiple penis scenes. I mean, they're
Well,
when they're going around getting all the body parts. There's a penis in a jar, and then like
yeah,
like once again, like the hands. And like he did have like stitching where they kind of stitched them together. So I'll throw him a bone and say half point, right?
yeah,
They tried.
boom. Two words that explain they tried. They tried.
Well, okay. The next category, now this is a controversial category in itself. We're
Yes.
gonna go on offensiveness. So we're gonna rate this like if you like offensiveness, that's what we're rating this on.
Yes.
What do you have to say?
Oh boy. Like they use the J word for Jimi Hendrix's hands, so that's offensive. But Joe, I did not know that would be the least offensive thing in this movie. Not just because of like comparison, but just because of how deep they went into things. Because back to Rock and Roll Frankenstein, the King being gay. There are scenes with gerbils and condoms.
Yeah.
There's him trying to hide his sexuality. Um, yeah, boy, oh boy, and they didn't hold anything back with slurs for gay people as well. So
Nope.
boy,
Nope.
oh boy, this was in 1999. This was man,
And that was one of the things that I was going to say about it. It is very much of its time.
yeah,
It kind of has that like 90s Howard Stern, let's just make fun of everything vibe to it. It's weird watching it nowadays, I guess.
yes, very much so.
Like
Yes.
none of that would fly in a movie today.
Oh God.
um, but I have to say, if you like offensiveness, then I have to give it 1 point. It is offensive.
When I saw this and I was talking to you about it, I was like, yeah, this wouldn't get made today, but it does have that. Oh my gosh, they went that far. I will give it a one. Now, here at Perfect Third Podcast, we are not trying to offend anybody,
Nope.
but if you like very crude and offensive behavior, jokes, good lord, this movie, wow.
Well, Lamar, we tallied the score and we came up with an average of it's a 2.5. Well, they got the big point for offensiveness. I guess
The
I
one
kind of
whole point that we gave for the
kind of
whole
saved the
movie.
rating.
Good lord, they boy oh boy oh boy.
So, well, what a way to kick off the Halloween season. We finally did a Frankenstein movie.
Put those air quotes up there, Joe, because this movie is more about a dark movie about coming to terms with your sexuality, even though you were put together by a greedy exec.
Yeah, there you go. Well, maybe there's a deeper meaning through all that. Maybe it's more about letting the corporate entities control your life or something.
Boy, you're starting to sound like me, goddamn it! I didn't even think about that shit. Maybe, Joe,
Anyways,
maybe. Hey,
does that wrap this up, LeVar? Rock
it
and roll
does.
Frankenstein. Peace.
Deuces.